Hello, fictional. Welcome to the Fiction Series X. Today we are gonna see, what if Issei got harem with Irina, Raynare and Ophis? Part 1. If you end up liking this video, please consider subscribe, so without further ado, let's get into the video. The day was going to be a boring day. It was bright out when he stepped foot out of his home, with little clouds to be seen in the sky. The wind felt nice on his cheeks, that was for sure, but it didn't do away with the foreboding that today would be boring. That was the single thought that was running in one particular boy's head as he walked alone to school, eyes staring at nothing in particular, as he simply relied on muscle memory to get to his destination. With no walking companion, he was left with random thoughts and simply whistling to occupy his time. Sometimes, he'd notice something interesting, maybe arguing cats or a cicada, or he'd wave at people he walks past, though there wasn't much else to be said there. Did I finish all my homework? He thought just for the sake of thinking something. He hummed listlessly, passing by a stray dog. Yeah, I'm pretty sure I did. Guess I'll have to tell Sensei that she won't be coming today, though. He pouted a little, wishing he could stay back to watch over his friend. A fever is never fun to deal with. He did enough run-ins with the darn thing to know that being confined to his bed and forced to eat just porridge sucks a whole heck. Although, one Issei does make the best food ever, in his opinion. Just thinking of his older sister gets him to chuckle a little. Like a mother hen, that one is, always fretting over everyone. She may be the oldest, technically, but man is it hard to see her as that. Last time someone tried to flirt with her, they'd though she'd been 20 at the very least. Poor guy got rejected, though. Something about family coming first and all that, although he's pretty sure she just used that as an excuse to not get together with anyone at all, for some odd reason. Darn. Kind of want to go back home already. The thought was shoved aside just as quickly as it had come. Besides getting scolded for purposeful truancy, he'd be doted on by everyone back home then again, that happens just about all the time at home, so that was sort of inevitable. Taking a few turns, he notices a few other fellow students, complete with their dress shirts, blazers and pants for the boys, or the dress and magenta skirt with a shoulder cape for the girls. 2 becomes 3, then 16, then 25. And eventually, the road becomes congested with nothing but students as all of them bustle towards the same direction he was headed, their boisterous chatter providing the background noise. Yo, I heard you got dumped. What's up with that? Wahoo told you that? I never told anyone before. My mom asked me to head home right after school to help with the diner, sorry. Dogs are way superior than cats, gal. Trust me on that. I wonder if I'll get to see the 2 great ladies of cool later today. Crap, I left my homework back home. Go ahead without me, I'll see you later. Oh my god. This is the 3rd time already. The boy can't help but grin at the energy permeating off of everyone. Even early in the morning, for it to be this hectic was a good thing. It's important to start the day with positive vibes, after all. Feeling much better, he passes through the grand gates of Kuo Academy freshly, made co-ed after years of having been girls only. It's no surprise to him that he's seemingly surrounded on all sides by girls. Beautiful ones, cute ones, tall and short, brown or black hair, there's all sorts of girls to go around. Now that he thought about it, one of his classmates has natural pink hair. Some have blue. And Ria-senpai has red, and not like European ginger, but like actual blood red. That all of them are actually natural is surprising, given that, at least to his knowledge, the only natural colors should be black, brown, blonde, ginger. Wholly unfocused on the road before him, Issei is unable to do anything as someone collided into his chest. Whoops. The boy's eyes widen, but he manages to steady himself and grab the person by the shoulders to keep them from falling. I'm so sorry. I wasn't looking and Issei-senpai. Hi there, he greeted, smiling. I'm so sorry, senpai. The girl bowed sharply, bright blush on her face that crept up to the tips of her ears that made her look like a living cherry. I was trying to look for a friend of mine, and I accidentally bumped into you. Nah, don't worry about it. It happens from time to time, he shrugged nonchalantly. God knows how many times he's done that. In fact, he remembered accidentally bumping someone and pushing them down the stairs that hadn't been great. So yeah, he clears his throat, ignoring that particular memory. Let's just let it slide. And hey, you still need to go find your friend, right? Better get going. Classes might be starting soon. Right. Of course. Bowing once more, the girl beams a smile at him. Thank you, Issei-senpai. Waving happily at the fleeing girl, Issei watches her for a couple of minutes until she disappears from sight, upon which he then proceeds on to his class. Issei Hyoudou, 17 years old and currently a second-year student of Kuo Academy. Likes videogames, manga, staying home and learning a lot about different cultures and whatnot. At first glance, Issei strikes one as a typical guy. Brown eyes and brown hair, moderately tall, comes from a simple family. There wasn't much else that he could think to describe himself other than being as average as one could get. But here in Kuo, it seemed as if his reputation seemed a little more esteemed than he thought it should really be. Sure, he's generally nice to everyone and doesn't seem to be one of those lecherous bastards, in the girl's word, so everyone in school likes him. Granted, he typically earns more favor from the girls, and that naturally sets him at odds with the jealous guys that make up almost a whole ninth of the population of boys in this school, but still. Also, nothing about him was typical. Or, more accurately, the situation he has found himself in. Verily much the opposite actually, although we'll look into that later on. Returning to the story, Issei strolls through the corridors of the main building, greeting the students he recognized before he eventually arrives at his classroom. Peeking through the door, he noticed that it was still fairly empty, with none of the other boys present whatsoever. Not everyone had gotten here already, it seems like. Oh? A loud voice penetrated the room, drawing some eyes towards her. Looks like everyone's best friend has arrived. Issei. The boy rolls his eyes, smiling at his friend's good-natured teasing. Ika, you know that that's not true. I'm pretty sure there's 8 or 15 guys who don't like me. That's your clue word, guys. When it comes to the girls, well. He ignored her, wagging her brows at him, knowing that she meant well on her word. Ika Kiryu was a lot of things, but mean-spirited is not one of them. Now a tease. Well, she might as well have the world written everywhere on her face to make that explicitly clear for everyone else. In any case, where's your friend? The two of you always come together to class, and you're always together other times too. Never seen a moment when her hip ain't stuck to yours. She's sick today, he replied, settling down in his seat and unpacking his bag. He sat against the wall, in the very middle, which gave him a pretty good view of the courtyard outside. Countless other students were taking their time getting to their classrooms. Caught a fever, so she'll be resting for today. She'll probably come back tomorrow. Oh yeah? Guess that's why you're looking a little glum today, her words caused him to perk up. Thought I didn't notice it. Heh. To be fair, you don't look too different from usual, but I can tell that you're not as chirpy as always since she's not around. You really like her, huh? Yeah, I'd say I do, he nodded, grinning sheepishly. Hard not to, since we're childhood friends and all. We've been through a lot. Plus, she's a lot of fun to be with. Oh, poor Issei misses his little friend, the lack of mockery in her tone makes him smile back. Well, don't worry, Kay. Classes will be over before you know it and then you can go back home and see her. Tell her I said hi while you're at it. And wish her a speedy recovery for me. I will. Thanks, Ika. Issei. He jumps in his seat at the loud outburst, he and Ika turning to find 2 girls standing at the door to their classroom. One bore brown hair while the other pink. Seriously, the fact that it's actually natural and not dyed still baffles him to this day, and both were looking seriously disappointed. Uncertain of what had spoiled their moods this early in the day, he tried to wrangle his brain for an idea. Discovering nothing, however, he opted to just swallow down his fear and try his best to be calm with these 2. Hey, Murayama, Caddis. What's wrong? What do you mean what's wrong? Of course something is wrong. Murayama huffed as they walked over to his desk, their classmates watching the scene play out. Oof. That doesn't really tell him much. He could list with both hands the number of things that get on their nerves, and then some more. Luckily, he doesn't need to ask them to elaborate before Caddis followed up after her friend. We saw you walking alone. We called out to you, but you ignored us. Oh, I did. Weird. Had he seriously not heard them? Probably not, since he'd been so stuck in his head thinking about random things. Sorry. I guess I wasn't really paying attention to my surroundings. Well, I guess it's our fault for not approaching you to begin with, sighed the brunette. And you looked rather absent-minded. She's not here. Oh, no, she's sick today. No wonder you came here alone, sounding a lot softer than earlier. Caddis takes a seat beside him and balanced her chin on her knuckles. You two would always go everywhere together. Almost as if you two are a couple. Us? A couple? He tried to imagine it, only to end up laughing. Come on now, you're joking, right? There's no way that'd be possible. What's wrong with that? Ika piped in, grinning. I mean, you two look pretty cute together. Made me think that you two were dating to begin with. Imagine my surprise when you two weren't. That surprised him. Really? I don't think we've ever acted like a couple, though. Caddis giggled at that. Are you sure about that? Holding hands, sitting closely together, sharing your food aren't those couple things to do? How when you put it like that, I guess you're not wrong but nah, I don't think she sees me in that sort of way. Doubt I actually catch her attention. You sure about that? If anything, you're a pretty special guy. I'd go so far as to say that all the girls in this room would definitely want to date you. The other 2 girls turned red. Ika. Me? The brunette blinked, pointing at himself. He'd gotten rather used to being teased by the girl, but her honesty took the wind out of his sails. That's weird. You're being weird. Are you, Ika? Still am, baby. And hey, I'm speaking for the entire school. I mean, you probably won't beat Hyoudou in terms of handsomeness, certainly no way that'd happen. Guys got the good-looking genes expressed. But you're rather handsome yourself. And it helps that you've got a good personality, which is something all the girls can appreciate. I mean, she's not wrong, Caddis muttered, face the same color as her hair. But you don't need to be so blunt about it, Ika. Hey, boys like him appreciate dead-on honesty. Right, Issei. Huh? Well, I guess. Lots of people like to beat around the bush, but that makes it a little hard to understand things. Precisely. The glasses-wearing girl snapped her fingers, looking pleased. See? That's why you're my favorite boy in this crazy school. Huh? Thanks, Ika. Snap. He turns his head towards Murayama, whose body was extremely stiff. Something wrong, Murayama? Nothing. She squeaked, trying and failing to smile naturally. Her uncharacteristic shyness is completely at odds with her demeanor from earlier. In any case, are you not interested in dating her? It's not that I'm disinterested, just that I haven't really given it much thought. His shrug and casual answer had them curious. I mean, I get that teenagers are always thinking about relationships, but I've kinda got a lot of things on my plate. So I don't think I can think about that for now, although, I guess I'll give it a try someday when I feel like it. And when you do, come to Big Sister Ika for dating advice, the girl winked. We're both the same age, he deadpanned at first, but his smile came easily to him afterwards. But alright, why? I'll be relying on you then. MMHM. You bet. From there, the group of four chat on a little longer before their homeroom teacher arrives. That was the cue for everyone to return to their designated seats, Issei retrieving his writing materials. He notes that the seat in front of him is empty, and he can't help but pout at that. Still, he pushes that thought aside, deciding to focus on class. Only for the back doors to suddenly be pushed open, slamming against the wall with a loud thud. Everyone's heads turned towards the suspects. Sensei. We're not late, are we? It was his fault, not mine. Approximately 80% of 100% of all girls in the room's faces scrunched up in disgust at the sight of the two boys, save for Ika, who rolls her eyes and smirks at them. The boys are either indifferent to them or regard them with the same distaste as the girls do. Not Issei, though. Yo, Mitsuda. Motohama. He yelled, pointing at the clock. You're 2 minutes after roll call. They really are, their classroom teacher sighed. Just get in your seats, you two. And try to come earlier next time. Yes, sir. Snickers and sighs broke out amongst the students as the one with a shaved head and the other wearing glasses trod to their seats, panting all the while. Their clothes are a little ruffled, too. Did they seriously run all the way here from home? Their teacher at the front sighs. Well, now that that's over, here's what you should expect today. Issei is, by no means, a bad student. His relatively above average grades in class should be a pretty good indication of that. He makes sure to pay attention to class, answering questions when asked by the teacher, and generally making sure that he doesn't come off as being inattentive. But she definitely wanted to be. By some miracle of life, classes managed to go faster than usual. Lunch rolls around, and Issei bids his friends farewell as they pile out of the class. Ika mentions needing to see the photography club for something, while Murayama and Caddis are oddly flustered and tell him that they'll be somewhere. Where that is, he wasn't sure. So that left. Oh, those two. They got called over to the principal. Probably to be given a what for. You know, the usual stuff. Yeah. Those two aren't troublemakers, which they are, in the sense that they're known infamously as the perverted duo, two of the most perverted dudes in the school, that get flagged for peeping on girls and taking pictures on them while they're changing and whatnot. No wonder almost all the girls in the school hates their guts. Especially Murayama and Caddis, who are often the victims of their pastime. On the one hand, he's honestly shocked both guys keep getting away with that. On the other, how have they not fixed that supposed peephole in their building already? Well, that leaves me with no one to have lunch with, he sighed, somewhat dejected by that. Who else? While it was true that Issei was generally cordial with just about everyone, he doubted he could say that he was actually close with that many people. While most of them had their little groups, his consisted of his childhood friend, Ika, Murayama and Caddis, and since all of them are absent, that just about leaves him with nil. And he doubted he was brave enough to walk up to someone and ask if he could eat with them. And who else is there? Maybe he could try out the roof. Technically, no one's allowed to go up there, but it should be. Issei. He perks up at the voice that calls for him. Turning his head, he spots a blue-haired girl whom he recognizes to be his senior approaching him with a smile and a wave. Beside him, a pleasant-looking girl with braided brown hair is also waving at him. "Yeah, Tsubasa." He grins. "Hey. You two on a student council job?" "Not at all. We're just heading to the cafeteria to have lunch with the others," the brunette answered. "How about you? If you're free, you wanna join us?" "Oh, is that fine? I mean, I thought you'd like it if it's just you guys." "Not at all, silly," giggled Ria. "Well, it's usually just us, we don't mind if others come join us. In fact, I'm pretty sure everyone would like it if you could join us." She tapped her hands together. "Won't you eat with us, Issei?" "Well, when you put it like that, how can I say no?" His reply got them to perk up with joy. "Lead the way." The student council of Kuo Academy, led by Sauna Shitori, is known for being the most scariest group in the school. They exact justice in the blink of an eye, taking down any wrongdoers and maintaining order within the school so effectively, it's as if they're actually a secret task force. Which, considering everything he's seen, wouldn't be the weirdest thing, to be honest. If all the animes he's watched before holds any truth, it's that student councils in schools are usually super. But that aside, he also knew that the people who comprise the student council are all actually nice people. Issei can't help but recall his first time dealing with the student council. Funnily enough, it hadn't been because he'd been caught doing something wrong. In fact, it was because he'd gotten lost in one of the old buildings. That was how he ended up meeting Tomo, and to this day, they're still good friends as back then. Since then, he'd befriended the rest of them, so he's gotten along with them rather nicely ever since. And that meant they'd try to invite him into joining them in countless activities. Nice people, all of them, and genuine in carrying their duty. They arrived at their destination shortly after, having chatted together about all kinds of things. Ria and Tsubasa guided him to a large table in the far back, where he could spot everyone else, already partaking in their meals as they talked about one thing or another. Until Tsubasa decided to make their presence known. "Hey everyone, sorry we're late." "Oh, don't worry about Issei-senpai. Hi. You'll be joining us for lunch, Issei-chan." "That would be lovely." "Oh, cool. I was hoping you'd join us. Come on, take a seat." Issei laughs at how welcoming everyone is, happily taking a seat at the table. Haruko Nomura is chirpy as ever, filled with energy even with just greeting him. Momo Hanakai regards him with a warm look, her pet name for him a way of showing affection on her part. And lastly, Tomo Meguri, the very first student council member he'd befriended. "Hey, everyone. Thanks for having me." "Oh, don't you worry about it. It's always a pleasure to have you with us." At the white-haired girl's words, the others all made sounds of agreement. "Hope you aren't uncomfortable with only girls being here." "Considering my household, it'd be strange if I felt awkward because of that," he chuckled back. Then, he looked around their table to look for a couple of familiar faces. "Actually, yeah, where is Saji? He out on an errand or something? And Kaichu and Fuku Kaichu too." "Oh, Genshiro-kun didn't come to school today. Caught a fever, him too. Dang." He muttered a soft prayer for his quick recovery. Kaichu and Fuku Kaichu, on the other hand, are currently sorting out some documents in the room. "They told us to go ahead and eat, so here we are. And it's a good thing that you're here, because." Tomo rummaged through her bag for something, before laying it on the table with a flamboyant motion. "Ta-da." He tilted his head once the object was revealed. A pack of cards. Meguri Ria sighed. "You know we're not allowed to bring anything like cards into the school. This is considered as contraband." "Oh, please. So long as we don't get caught, it won't be a problem." Talk about a dangerous attitude. Then again, she wouldn't be Tomo if she wasn't. Plus, there's not much else to do while we wait for lunch to finish, so let's play a quick game or two. "I don't mind." Issei planted a rice bowl in his mouth, chewing on it before swallowing. "I mean, if you guys want to, that is. Otherwise, we don't have to." "Well, I suppose it wouldn't be so bad." Tsubasa was the first to cave, getting the maroon-haired girl to cheer. "But strictly no gambling, alright?" Of course, of course. Geez, what do you take me for?" "Yuhe. I'll choose to believe you. For now." "What do you mean for now?" "Do you know how to play blackjack, Issei-senpai?" Haruko asked while Tsubasa and Tomo bantered over the latter's likely habit of gambling when no one notices, something that she's being very vocal about denying. He nodded back. "Yup. My sister taught me how to play." "Which one? Your little sister or your older sister?" "My big sister," he chuckled. "She likes playing games a lot and she especially likes the kinds that people can play together." And then she came across blackjack one day. Needless to say, she's gotten really good at it ever since. He notices how Tomo perks up at the last bit. "Every time I play with her, it's at least a 2-to-5 win ratio in her favor." "That's so, eh?" The maroon-haired girl grinned impishly. "Sounds like a worthy challenger. If you want, I can ask her if she'd like to play a match or two with you sometime later." "Sure. But first, let's play together." HMPH. If we are to do this, then I shall give my all. Issei-chan, watch me win this game. You got it. Good luck, everyone. And from there, the student council members plus one descend into a moment of chaos, distrust and bragging moments, along with yells of rematch, callouts for cheating and so on. Needless to say, it wasn't a very boring lunchtime. The rest of the day, just as Aika had said, went by like a blur. And the next thing he knew, he was packing up his stuff and getting ready to head back home. Felt like it was just a couple of minutes ago that I'd just been playing blackjack with everyone. Man, how time flies. Everyone were shuffling out of the classroom as he thought to himself, bidding him farewell in the process. In turn, he responded kindly, still trying to put his things together and make sure that nothing would slip out later on. Yo, Issei. He perks up at Matsuda's voice, noticing the wide and pervy grin plastered on his face. You free right now, man? Wanna come over to look at some gak? Issei's one of the only good ones in the school, and we do not need you corrupting him. Murayama shouted, having struck him squarely in the ribs with her bakken. Oof. That's definitely going to bruise later on. Issei, she calls, all smiles now. Wanna head out together? We can walk you home, if you'd like. That should be my line, you know, he chuckled back. But sure, just until we're outside then. Then let's go. Cadis and Aika are waiting outside. Moving past the wheezing Matsuda, it doesn't take long to hear his fellow partner scream out his name in fashion similar to a soap opera, rushing over to help him up. Murayama doesn't even blink at them, although Issei does take a moment to sheepishly nod at them. The two of them convene with Cadis and Aika outside of their classroom, and soon the group of four are moving together, heading for the main entrance. Issei doesn't say much as they talk about today's events, having not paid much attention to the goings-on today beyond lunchtime. Eventually, however, he's dragged out of his thoughts by the sound of his friend's voice. So Issei, we were wondering if you'd mind us coming over to your place. Huh? He blinked. Sorry, zoned out there. Can you repeat what you just said? Nothing, really. Just wanted to ask if it's cool if we came over to your place. Hang out for a bit. You girls want to? He didn't intend to sound so surprised, but he still did. No one's ever wanted to come over before. I don't think anyone ever has, to be honest. Then you could call it curiosity on our part, you know. It'd be interesting to see where you live, Cadis said, the other two nodding. That is, if you don't mind, of course. Precisely. So? Aika smirked at him. How about it? Shoot. This is new. He hadn't ever had friends from outside ever come over to his house, probably because there had never been a reason for them to come in the first place. If there was ever a group project, he'd go to a friend's house instead of inviting them over. He recognized that as a strange thing. And not because he actively repels people from coming over, far from it. It's just that he recognizes that his house isn't really the most productive place to be, considering all the people inside who might jeopardize his time and dote on him a little too much, he would say, which, sure, he loves them for it. But it would certainly distract him from what's important. So, he doesn't make the offer. Now that it's happening, however, he's experiencing conflicting emotions. On the one hand, he's excited to have them over. On the other. My place is kind of weird. You girls okay with that? DSSH. Weird, he says, scoffed Aika. I've dealt with weird my whole life. Heck, Kuolon is weird. What's there to surprise me? I've got a pet alligator. If this was a comedy show, this would be the perfect time for the music to cut off into a screeching halt and maybe add the audience's laughter. All three girls promptly stopped to stare at him, eyes wide like platters. Issei stared back, all too casual. I'm sorry, but did you just say you have a pet alligator at your home? He rubbed the back of his neck, offering a sheepish smile. Well, we say that he's an alligator, but it's hard to tell if he's actually a crocodile or not. And he's hairy. Hairy? He's one of a kind. Anyways, we call him Rakuha actually, I gave him that name. We were planning on changing it, but he kind of liked it, so we let him have it. In any case, Rakuha's really nice. He's super gentle, so he won't hurt anyone. Except thieves. He attacked someone, Murayama gasped. It's okay, though. The guy didn't lose a limb or anything. He, sort of passed out after peeing himself, and we stopped Rakuha from eating him. So, all's went that ended well, am I right? Seeing the lack of faith in the girls, he could only laugh nervously. Yeah. But really, there's nothing wrong. I'm sure you'd love him. Issei, you do know that most people would likely freak out from the concept of an alligator being inside one's home, right? I know that. But, it's just well, he's been with us since I was 6, so we kind of got used to it. That's Cadis struggled for words before eventually letting out a deep sigh. How have we never known this about you? Probably because it's not something that typically comes up in usual conversations, they grumbled about how he was right about that. Also, we have a parrot. Well, he talks, but he's not really a parrot. And we have a jaguar, NA. Wait, you have a jaguar now? How many pets do you have? Ahahawiel. It's funny how his norm is considered to be so out of this world for his 3 friends, which, to be fair, is true. They'd never grown up their whole life alongside some of the crazy things he has, so there was no denying that they'd likely be caught by much surprise once they arrive at his home. In fact, the walk back isn't as long as he expected it to be. Aika, Murayama and Caddis hound him with question upon question, of course, but they're also power-walking their way to his house. He has to jog as a result to lead the way home, so the trip back home isn't too long. They come upon a generous 3-floored house, renovated to house all the new residents that enter his life along the years. It had costed them quite a bit, but everything worked out in the end. Just seeing it fills him with happiness. It feels a little too silly to feel that way, but Issei knows that he's simply happy to go back to his family and see everyone. He doubted he'll ever lose this feeling. I'm home. Issei loudly announced when he was outside, walking towards the door. He turned his head to say something to his friends, though he noticed none of them were near, so he looked behind him to find the girls looking wary and standing a few ways back. He grinned back at them. Girls, don't worry, it'll be fine. Everyone here is really nice. Nothing bad is going to happen. That you have to point it out at all is concerning. Yeah, but. Issei. All 4 teenagers turn towards the source of the voice, only to find no one. At first. But when Issei looks down, his lips morph into a wide smile as he regards the little girl with black hair and eyes, dressed in black, violet and blue. Office. I'm home. Yes. Welcome home, she nodded back, accepting his head pats. Though her face showed no change, there was no mistaking the joy her eyes seemed to reflect. Then, she looked past him, to the 3 girls staring at her in a mix of surprise and curiosity. And, they are. Oh, them? These are my friends from school. They wanted to come over and visit us for a bit. Call it a trick of the light or something equally ridiculous, but he swore that, for a moment, Office's eyes seemed to narrow while she looked at them. It was gone with a blink later, though she suddenly latched onto his arm like a koala. Issei, come inside. Yep. Say, how Lucy's doing? She's better. Misses you very much, however. Yeah, I missed her too. Even though it's only just been a day. Oh, Rakuha. Hey I just got back from school. Whoa, easy there, these are just my friends. No need to be so on guard. They're just visiting for a little bit. Oh my god, it's actually a hairy alligator. Issei, what in the world is that? Like I said, this is Rakuha, our pet alligator. Well, I say pet, but we treat him more like a family member. Everyone else too. Rakuha, this is Murayama, Caddis and Aika. Say hi. How is there an alligator that massive living in your house? Oi, what's with all the ruckus? Can't a bird get some shut-eye when he Who are they? Issei, you brought in outsiders again? They're not outsiders, Griffin. Again, they're my friends. We're in the same class. Iffin. Your feathers are shedding again. Can't you do something about Issei. Welcome home. And you brought friends. Giovanni-san, I'm home. And yep, I did. This here is Murayama, Caddis and Aika. Whoa. Welcome. Any friend of Issei's is a friend of ours. Oh, Issei, you must be sweltering in that blazer of yours. Come, take it off, I'll get it washed in the meantime. And I've already prepared our meals in the kitchen, so why don't all of you just rest first in the living room while I. As the Hyoudou residence gets louder and louder, and his friends are predictably drawn further and further into the chaos and confusion as they step into his home, Issei can't help but simply let himself join the mayhem, laughing along with everyone as he returns to what is a typical day in their household. And, just as ever, he wouldn't want it any other way. The dimensional gap of space between all realities, that which no normal being could simply walk into, and which is extremely punishing on all that enter, for those who lack sufficient energy or protection, would waste away within mere seconds within this deserted space. Life, reason and existence ceases to matter once one takes a step into the void. Many are those who theorize of a limbo or a wasteland for which the souls of the lost go to, for one convoluted reason or another. But there was no life within this void, completely empty and home to nothing. Nothing save for 2 particular entities. But that requires a bit of context, so let's start there. At the start of existence, countless worlds and realms were formed by the progenitor's will. A realm for the gods, for the humans, for the sinners and devils, for the devout and angels, for monsters, for otherworldly abominations, for the normal, for the abnormal. There was no limit to how many possible realms truly existed. And one such creation is the dimensional gap itself, a void that exists between earth, heaven and the underworld, serving as nothing more but a death sentence for all who dare to venture into its nothingness. But in the beginning of time and space, it had witnessed the birth of two creatures that would go down in history as some of the most important figures in many stories, cultures and religions. From within the emptiness and nothingness, two creatures were brought into existence, Great Red, the true dragon, and Ophis, the Ouroboros dragon, of which one would represent the illusion of dreams, whilst the other embodied the limitless abyss of infinity. One wonders how these two came into being, or what their purpose had been in the grand scheme of things. Two dragons that were feared by gods and other greater powers, believing that the two had the potential to bring about the end of the universe if they so desired. Such was the sheer potential and dangers in these two that all knew not to antagonize them. Yet, for years, they had been dormant. One could only wonder what was going on in there. As it turned out, despite being siblings by the nature of having been born together, it seemed as if Ophis and Great Red didn't exactly get along all that well. Maybe it had something to do with the fact that they were both too prideful, or that they often fought over who would be allowed to rule over their home. In that essence, their ridiculous feuds can be attributed to being sibling-like. Years turned into years and more. Eventually, Great Red would be seen drifting across the dimensional gap with all the beepiness of a grade 8 douchebag, having claimed it as his territory and home all to himself. Ophis, on the other hand, would have gone missing sometime before that, absent from her birthplace for reasons no one could determine. Not even the hardiest of investigators were able to locate her position after extensive searching across all realms. So one can imagine the sheer panic it caused for everyone in the know when a dragon with world-ending powers is suddenly MIA. Somewhere out there, perhaps causing unimaginable amounts of damage that no one couldn't fathom and that they knew they couldn't do anything to stop. The lack of reports did not alleviate their fears. No one knew where Ophis, the Ouroboros dragon, had gone to. What could this possibly mean? Ophis, the Ouroboros dragon, infinity dragon god, one of the most powerful entities in the world, and decidedly Great Red's archenemy, was bored. You read that right. Ophis, one of the two beings that was created within the dimensional gap and housing enough strength to lay waste to everything that ever existed, whom the world feared upon discovering that she had suddenly left her home dimension, was bored. Perhaps one might say that she shouldn't really have a reason not to be bored, which she totally did. As much as she loved the dimensional gap, or really, the silence that it provides, nothing really goes on inside there. Sure, there's Great Red, but they practically despise each other. Then there are the Gogmagogs, although those haven't been active since she could remember. A shame that she wasn't a magical technician, or else she might have already fixed them by now. Would at least give herself some company. As it was, there was nothing in there that she could honestly find herself being occupied with outside of fighting with Great Red, which gets boring very quickly since they always reach a stalemate. You know, equal levels and all. And again, no company. Real boring in there. So, Ophis did the one thing that came to mind, go visit the other worlds. After all, she's the Ouroboros dragon, which meant that she was not bound to the same worldly rules as all other races are. She could well go anywhere and do whatever she freaking wanted, and she'd absolutely made full use of that advantage to visit all the realms she could, although under a different guise, so to not give herself away, since she's pretty sure just about all races fear her. For some reason or another. She has to admit that, for as much as she likes her current form, she might have to consider a change. Her last one had been an old man, and that had brought her much chagrin when people left and right tried to send her to an elderly caregiver home. And now, as a little girl, she has to deal with people constantly asking her where her parents were. She sighed. Really, all these beings and their ridiculousness. Even so, she didn't let that stop her. Menial things like this are annoying, she'll admit, but it would be better to simply ignore it. She did just that, setting out to visit all sorts of worlds to find some way to sate her boredom. With all kinds of sights to see and things to do, certainly they'd be interesting to visit, right? Wrong. As it so turned out, having lived her whole life in the dimensional gap had meant very little understanding of the general workings of the world beyond her home. And apparently, there were all sorts of conspiracies and battles going on between the races that usually involved catastrophic outcomes. In fact, last she recalled, hadn't there been a great war between the three races that resulted in their numbers being severely culled? Somewhat interesting, but not what she was looking for. She put all of that aside, focused more on simply traveling anywhere and everywhere, all while making sure to avoid anywhere that she might be recognized. That ought to be a lot more annoying to deal with. To be fair, each world was individually unique, bearing characteristics that helped distinct them from the others. The sights she'd seen when visiting the countless worlds would certainly be unforgettable for the many years to come. It helped that most of the ones she dealt with were cordial enough to make her visits comfortable. And yet there was something missing. Something that she simply couldn't figure out despite the numerous places she'd gone to. Something that spurred her to continue traveling and visiting more worlds. Eventually, however, with much traveling here and there, it would ultimately bring her to a dingy bar in the outskirts of a city in Underworld, its dimly lit state and the smell of cheap booze in the air, making it an immediate low star in her opinion. Why I am even here, I do not know, she sighed to herself, nursing a glass of water. The bartender was drunk beyond consciousness and he'd only left a sign on the counter saying that water was free for anyone to take. Might as well have a drink than nothing at all. It's been 2 years. Where else to go? 2 years of traveling. Some might say that she needed to be patient before she found something worthwhile, but having gone to so many places and found nothing thus far, she was beginning to wonder if her endeavor had been doomed from the start. She sighed once again, taking a sip from her drink. Right about now, she'd be lazing about in a quiet corner in the dimensional gap before getting rudely interrupted by Great Red. Good times without Great Red, that is, those had been. Should I just go back? It'd be rather easy to do that. And that meant having to fight with Great Red, which wouldn't really be too difficult. But Ophis had grown bored of constantly picking fights with the damn thing, knowing that neither would win and they'd simply get nowhere. An absolute waste of time. And again, being back home would be much better than being here, where rats were openly scurrying across the floorboards and the paint was peeling off the walls. Where the other patrons were either too loud yelling or so drunk that they were emptying their stomachs' contents in another part of the room. Ophis never thought she could ever hate something without having tried it before, but seeing the effects of alcohol on these people, she doubted she'd ever give it a try someday. No matter. She wouldn't have to deal with any of this any longer. She'll just. Hey, little lady, her line of thought ceased when a voice seemed to be directed at her. Someone took a seat beside her at the counter, flashing her a gentle smile as he tipped his hat at her. Tufts of black hair peeked out from under one side, while white hair was visible from the other side. Rather odd to see someone like you in a rundown place like this on your own. Your parents out? I have none. Ah, is that so? Then I apologize for being so inconsiderate, she shook her head at that. It was simply how it is, no use feeling offended for something that wasn't even his fault. And I apologize again if it seems like I'm being a busybody, although I can't help but notice that something seems to be bothering you. Everything alright? You can't tell. Sort of my thing. Call it a fifth sense or something, but I can usually tell if someone is unhappy. Little things like body gestures and posture, eye movement and whatnot. I'll admit, you're not so expressive, so it was a little hard to read you, but you had a little frown on your face. That was enough. Is that so? If he could tell that sort of thing, then she had to give him credit. I am bored, she answered. Bored, you say? The person quirked one brow. I have traveled to many places, yet none are exciting. It is a little disappointing. Ah, I see, he made an understanding sound as he stroked his bristly chin. I suppose you're not wrong there. Well, every place is relatively different from the next, you don't always find what you're looking for. Takes a bit of time to find. But, and suddenly, his lips morphed into a cheeky smile. I bet that's because you haven't visited one place. Where do you mean? Why, I'm talking about Earth, of course. She perked up at the name, watching him wave his arms around in excited motions. It's where the humans live, which may seem like a turn-off at first, but there are plenty of our kind there as well. And plenty of the others, in fact, I'd go out on a limb to say that you'd find all races on that planet. Rather peaceful if you compare it to the other realms, but also the most interesting one. In fact, my brother moved there to work in a video game company making a good living there, good for him. But on a real note, there's all sorts of things there that are just so unique it would be hard to find them anywhere else. To some extent, in fact, Earth's cultures have influenced much of the other races too. Earth? She repeated the name. How odd. I had never heard of that place before. Sure is. Judging by your confusion, then you really haven't visited it yet, he chuckled. I suggest you give it a try. It's not like your other realms, I'll give you that. Peaceful, but filled with all kinds of things. I'm sure you'd have fun there. Fun? 2 years. That was how long it had been since she departed from the dimensional gap in search of someplace or something to sate her boredom. It was selfish, nonsensical and odd, but why should she care? She doubted there was a single soul who dare try to go against her. It's not like she was harming anyone. All she'd done was find something to cure her boredom. And it seemed that, now, she might know where to go next. I see very well, she nodded. I shall go there. Thank you. No worries, little lady, the man winked. I hope you have fun over there. I'm sure something interesting will happen to you there. That's always been the case, haha. Interesting, he says. If he had her curiosity before, he definitely has her full attention now. Unfortunately, he didn't stay long to answer any questions that she had, opting to leave the bar and leave her with budding curiosity. Ophis did not chase after him, deciding that she, too, should take her leave and visit this Earth that he speaks so highly about. And hey, if it turned out to be less than exciting than he made it out to be, she could always return home. She'll deal with Great Red one way or another, she'll figure it out. Stepping off the stool, she gave this place not even a second glance as she walked out through the front doors. The cold air of the relatively quiet street lined by rows of shop buildings greeted her, the town not particularly as memorable as other places she had seen throughout her travels. It was fairly deserted, although it does see its fair share of visitors from time to time. And right about now, it was time to leave this place behind. Without wasting a moment, she chanted the words necessary to bring to life a teleportation spell that could cross worldly boundaries. A magical circle formed beneath her feet, glowing jet black and engulfing her in light as it locked onto the appropriate coordinates. Earth. It felt strange to Ophis, who had existed since the dawn of time itself, that she hadn't ever heard of Earth before. With how that devil person made it sound, it was the most peaceful yet most unique realm to ever exist. And that piqued her curiosity right off the bat. To be fair, she'd been living in the dimensional gap minding her own business without really giving a care about the goings-on of the other realms, but now she really wants to know what Earth looks like. Crossing the border between the underworld and Earth, she felt her being ceased to be before becoming whole once more, reality and matter coming slowly making contact with her vessel. She felt the cool breeze of the world around her, her clothes ruffled from wind being projected by the deactivation of her spell. When the lights died down, Ophis's first assumption was to see a world set ablaze like a cooking pan, or an underworld beauty like Atlantis, or an overly bright beauty like heaven. Having visited realms with all kinds of appearances and natures, she'd certainly expected this one to be no different. But nope. The first thing that she sees is, well, it's dark. Is this the right place? She looked around, trying to discern any important landmarks. There were none. Granted, this was her first time coming to a place she had never heard of before in her life, so she could be forgiven for getting it wrong. But she had been absolutely certain that she'd locked onto the right place. The sounds of something creaking behind her caught her attention, prompting the dragoness to turn around. What greeted her was the sight of some strange place filled with a multitude of colored contraptions, all of them giving off no sense of magical aura. Were they inactivated? None of them resembled any sort of torture devices that she'd seen in books. She recognized the generally simple and designed streetlights, casting the area in warm yellow light, with several trees planted around to provide a greenery that made the place seem much more comfortable. Quickly scanning across the area, she looked to her left. And there, sitting on a strange chair suspended above the ground with chains on either side, was a young boy with a wild mane of brown hair. Is this a human? She thought to herself, slowly approaching the child, finding no distinguishing features on his person. No weird appendages or extra features, as far as she could tell. He looks just like any other race. But there is no unique energy coming off of him. Are all humans like this, then? How odd. For such creative creatures to also be uniquely defenseless as well, it certainly deserves some pondering. Perhaps that was how they made up for their lack of innate power that other races have, through innovation and creativity. Although this one doesn't exactly seem all too unique. What does stand out to her is the somberness in his gaze, staring off into space. It's a kind of gaze that she is surprised to see in a child's gaze, making her wonder if she wasn't meant to be here. You, she called out before she even realized it. He seemingly jumped in his seat, looking around him with wide eyes the same color as his hair, before his gaze finally settled on her. You are a human, yes? Eh? The boy blinked, confusion apparent on his expression. He looked around, then finally looked back at her, pointing his index at himself. Are you talking to me? Yes. You are human, correct? Yeah, I guess I am, he nodded, still regarding her with a confused look. You, looking for something? Not necessarily, she shrugged back, taking one look at the free seat beside him before deciding to mirror him, sitting atop it slowly. It seemed to swivel a little, and she grasped the chains to steady herself atop it. I am looking for something to do. Something to do? He asked once more, seemingly a little relaxed compared to earlier. Like what? Something fun, I suppose. Fun? Blinking, he stared at her for a few seconds before looking around them. Well, we are in a playground, so. This is called a playground. Judging by the name alone, it must mean that all these odd contraptions were designed specifically for entertainment, even if she couldn't really see the charm in them just yet. I see. Yeah. It's a place a lot of kids like us to play in, he hummed, leaning back in his seat. The only reason it's just the two of us here now is because kids usually go to playgrounds in the day. No one really comes around here late in the evening like right now, mostly because our parents wouldn't allow us. Mine don't mind too much since this place is near our house, so I sort of came here to think about stuff. I see, well, not a master of social interaction, she wasn't daft enough to know that she likely caught him at a bad time. No wonder he seemed like he was in a bad mood earlier. Should I leave? Would you prefer your solace? Nah, it's fine. I was getting lonely anyways, he chuckled, flashing her a little grin. It was the kind of smile that seemed so genuine that Ophis was momentarily surprised by. My name's Issei, by the way. You? I am Ophis. Ophis, eh? He whistled. That's a pretty name, she was caught off guard once more by his response. Such a name that had struck fear in millions of people, yet for him to call it pretty was completely unexpected. A benefit of being oblivious to her true nature, then. So Ophis. Whatcha doing? Waiting for your mom? I have no parent. I am my own being. Eh? Really? That's nuts. I don't see what's wrong with that, she said honestly, tilting her head. There are many without parents, is there not? Is that true? He asked back, furrowing his brows as he cupped his chin and looked at his own shadow. He seemed to suddenly tilt his body back and forwards, allowing himself to swing gently back and forth. Ophis watched, then set out to follow his motions. All the kids I know have a mom and a dad. There's no way no one's got none. Maybe you don't know where they are. No. I simply do not have any. Dang, okay. There was a moment of silence between the two, with only the clinking of the chain sounding off in the night as they swung back and forth. Or, more accurately, Issei was swinging back and forth while Issei was seated in place and frustratingly trying to get it to move even an inch. She grunted with each bodily push, but the chair refused to swing even a little. You need to lean back and forwards, he said. And maybe stretch your legs out. You'll get more momentum or something. I'm not really smart in my physics. Lean back and forwards humming, she properly observed his subtle movements before trying them for herself, letting her motions generate enough kinetic energy that allowed her to initiate a small motion. That was enough to spur her onwards, trying a little harder to propel herself even a little faster. And the next thing she knows, she's going up way higher and way faster than she had been earlier, enough to match Issei's peak of swing. The fallback was oddly heart palpitating, only to experience it once more as she shoots downwards to go up in the air. Nice, you're doing it. Yes. They swung for a little longer afterwards, as the motions had become ingrained in her body, and she easily matches Issei's swings. It's a temporary burst of exhilaration with each climb and fall that has her momentarily amazed by how simple this entire thing is, compared to the many things she had seen and done during her journey. Eventually, they come to a stop, with Issei stepping off of the seat with a little grin on his face. Say, Ophis. Since you're here and all, you want to try out some of the stuff here? I'll be heading back home in a fair bit, but until then, I'm thinking about staying here. So why don't you try out the things here? I'll even teach you. Fascinating. This one is a lot more generous and friendly than she'd given credit, and though it was probably dangerous to be out alone like this, she couldn't sense any malicious presence in her vicinity. Perhaps this place was just as quiet as that devil she'd met earlier today indicated. Well, I suppose that is okay, she nodded. Cool. Then let's give these a shot. Ophis had never seen these sorts of playgrounds in the other realms. Though none of these contraptions are actually life-threatening, certainly would defeat the point of making a safe and fun place for children to play in. If they were dangerous to begin with, they seemed to be designed for children to expend as much of their energy as possible. That was the only thing she could think of when Issei had begun introducing her to each one, explaining how each one's worked. Slides, seesaws, the swings that they tried out earlier, horizontal bars he called monkey bars, and some others. This playground seemed so small at first glance, but with how many equipment there is here, it's surprisingly compact. Once Issei was done showing and explaining to her what each equipment was for, he turned to look at her, arms crossed behind his head. So, what you want to try first? So she was being given the first choice. She'll admit that his consideration for her was rather nice. She looked around, wondering if any of them caught her attention. One particular thing did, and she pointed at it. That one. He followed the direction of her finger. Ooh, seesaws. Yeah, these are pretty fun. They require 2 people, correct? Then we can try them together. Let's go. He didn't even let her answer him before he grabbed her by the hand and dragged her towards it, helping her onto the seat on one end while he hastily took his position on the other. He grabbed the handle and she mirrored it. Alright, so, it's really simple. Just use your feet to push yourself up and then the other person will do it next. We'll take turns going up and down. Ready? Relatively simple. She nodded. Ready. Yosh. Without further ado, he bent his feet and pressed his feet against the ground. With a strong oomph. He straightened his legs and pushed himself upwards, which sent her downwards. Your turn. Nodding once more in return, she repeated what he did and pushed against the ground. And promptly slammed him down. Whoa. He cried out from suddenly being sent back down, bodily jerking up and down from the suddenness. It was as if the gravity exerted on him grew threefold in that single moment. Oh man. Office, you okay? I am fine, she replied monotonously. On the inside, however, she was feeling anything but. I misjudged my strength. I had pushed too much. She had to remember that this wasn't a battle. She was in the middle of playing with another human child, the human part particularly important because he doesn't have the same strength as other races typically do. And in her carelessness to consider her own strength, she just about almost broke the seesaw in her new companion. Issei, forgive me. Bang, you're a strong one, ain't you Ophis? There was a spark of competitiveness in his eyes when he yelled that. His posture shifted, shoulders hunched as he grinned at her. Ha. Well, you may be a girl, but I won't go easy on you. Take this. Aura. This time, he pumped all the strength he had into his legs and propelled himself upwards, sending Ophis down. She blinked at this. Without thinking, she pushed upwards with her full strength once more, sending Issei downwards as quick as before, practically slamming him down onto the ground like a hammer blow. And yet, Issei did not give up. He seemed bolstered by this, instead, trying, and failing, to prove himself the stronger of the two, which would be impossible considering he's just a human child going up against a dragon god. Persistence was part of his middle name, though. It took him 18 more tries before he finally conceded, panting with his face buried in his arms. "Man, you're strong, Ophis. I suppose. Oh okay. So, you wanna keep playing with this one, or try the other things? Let's move on to the next." The rest of the moment flies so fast she had trouble keeping up with everything. All that she could think of was how children are filled with boundless energy. After all, what else could explain how Issei could recover so quickly from all their playing and drag her around to try out the different games? She doubted she'd met children of other races as energetic as the boy here tonight. And yet, she has to admit, the opportunity to actually play with someone else is different, for a lack of a better term. It's a new experience she has that Ophis realized is making this moment less boring than usual. Even when she plays with the monkey bars and slide, which she could have played on her own, it feels somewhat refreshing to know that Issei is there to participate with her. There was some amount of annoyance that Issei was so good on the bars compared to her, but he immediately made up for it when he always cheered for her when she went right after him, as well as all the other things. Even now, as he helps her grasp the pull-up bar and she helplessly kick her legs in the air to try and give herself a boost upwards, she can't help but feel like this is infinitely better than all the other 2 years spent elsewhere. Nice. You've got it. Move on to the next. With some difficulty, she reached out to grasp the next bar, then she swung her other arm forwards to grab the next only to lose her strength and drop onto the ground. Her eyes widened with that. What? Oof. You were real close there, too, right in the middle, no less, Issei chuckled. To be fair, not everyone can do monkey bars. But you did real great there, Ophis. So, you want to try out the… No, she replied firmly. I'd like to try again. Eh? For reals? She didn't answer him, moving to the very start once more. With a huff, she jumps and grasps the first bar, feeling herself hang from it. Unlike before, however, she was far more determined to see this to the very end. Why, she wasn't sure, but she knew she had to win. Arms shaking and breath bated, she maneuvered herself forwards. One bar with one hand, then swinging to the next with the other hand. With determination spurring her forth, she moved to the next bar. Issei, having been watching her from earlier, was suddenly spurred to cheer for her. Alright. You got this, Ophis. Where earlier it had been frustration pushing her onwards, it was now Issei's faith in her that was now giving her the strength to persevere. Despite how this was physically less demanding compared to all her fights with Great Red, her arms seemed to ache lightly. Even so, she refused to give up. One bar. Then another. And another. Using the momentum from her swing, she released her backhand and grasped the bar in front of her. Then the next. And the next. Ophis, you're so close. Come on. Pouring all her strength into this one final swing, she moved forwards and released both hands and grasped the final bar at just the right time. Ah. Yeah, you did it. Her brown-haired companion was far more vocal, congratulating her with whoops of delight and pumping his arms in the air. She dropped down to the ground once she was done, coming face to face with absolute joy radiating off of his person. You did it, Ophis. How does it feel? It feels oddly nice. And that was a surprise on her part. All her life, she'd only ever expected enjoyment from taking back the dimensional gap from Great Red. For her to experience that sort of sense of fulfillment from this. She looked down on her palms. Her vessel, crafted to imitate a living being, included all the necessary organ systems to give her all the appropriate sensations. And right now, feeling the gentle thrum of heat and ache in her reddened palms, clenching and relaxing her hands. Well, for all that she knew, she wasn't complaining. In fact, she felt elated, if only a little. Ain't it? Trying real hard for something and then accomplishing it is always a nice feeling." He paused for a minute. "Whoa, accomplish. Big word. Gotta tell mom and dad that later." She ignored that particular bit, focused more on the message that he had delivered, and he wasn't wrong. Compared to her unending struggle to claim the dimensional gap from Great Red, her success in fulfilling the monkey bars challenge, albeit greatly trivial in comparison, brought forth its own sense of satisfaction. Perhaps that was just how things should be. Rather than to continue chasing an impossible dream, maybe she should be targeting for something well within her reach. Whatever that thing is, she wasn't sure, but maybe. Before she could say a word, however, a new voice cut the air. Issei. Both children, well, one human child and a dragon god, turned their heads towards the source of the voice, a young woman with dark brown hair, dressed in typical morning wear. "Mom?" The boy beside her blinked, watching her approach them. "What are you doing here?" "I got worried. You hadn't come back home, and it's gotten rather late, don't you think?" Haha, sorry about that. I was, struggling for words." He looked between his mother and Ophis before gesturing to the latter. "This is a friend I just met tonight. Her name is Ophis." Well, this is something. What she should be doing in this moment isn't exactly clear, so she defaulted to basic greeting before the boy's mother. "Hello." "Oh, hello Ophis-chan. Thank you so much for playing with Issei here. I was afraid that he'd be all on his own here, but I guess I didn't have to worry." "Yeah. I had a lot of fun tonight," the boy smiled, turning his gaze at the dragoness now. "And you, Ophis?" His question prompted her to think about his question, eyes gazing downwards as she considered their brief moment together earlier. "Yes," she finally concluded. "I had fun with you." "Well, that's good to hear." Issei's mother seemed rather pleased as well. Without even a warning, she reached out to pat her on the head, and Ophis simply allowed it. "Thank you again for playing with Issei. Right now, we'll be heading home, so we'll be." "Oh right." The boy cried out. "Mom, Ophis here told me she doesn't have a mom of her own. Or a dad." "What?" Momentary surprise flickered in her eyes before she faced the dragoness once more, putting on a kind smile. "Is that true, sweetie?" "That is true. I have never had any since the beginning." For some reason, Ophis felt like she had no reason to hide this from these two. That they were rather friendly made it none too difficult to open up to them. Plus, it's not like she'd ever be seeing them again after tonight, so it wasn't like it would change anything if she told them. That last thought stirred her heart. And not in a good way. She wasn't sure why. "I see. I'm sorry to hear that. It's not an issue for me. I have done well thus far." "Well, we can't just let you go off on your own, can we?" Issei's mother said. "So, I've got an idea, want to come over to our place?" "What?" If someone asked Ophis if she had expected this to happen, she would have easily told them no. After all, how could she have known that she'd somehow ended up making a friend in the form of a little human boy and then to be invited to live with said boy right after? Sounds like a plot of a novel, and yet here she is, living out that exact scenario at that moment. The walk back to the Hyoudou's residence, as she learned from his mother, who has asked to be referred to as auntie, was pleasant. With Issei providing the chatter and the natural sounds of crickets in the night, she was occupied enough to actually enjoy the walk to his home. "There it is," he said when they arrived, pointing at a direction. "Where we live. Architecture varies across the realms, and the humans seem rather modest in comparison to other places, for now, at least." Issei's home, though simple looking, still managed to look rather nice even from afar. Painted blue with a balcony and a brown roof, it had 2 levels, which seems just about right for a family of 3. Issei skips inside, his mother calling out to him to take off his shoes. Ophis blinks when she enters the house, immediately struck by a homely atmosphere that leaves her feeling so at ease. Little trinkets and furniture sprinkled throughout that doesn't make it feel so condensed, yet the amount of life within just the living room fills her with a sense of awe. It's something that the dimensional gap never had. "Welcome back, Issei and him. Who's the little lady?" The question came from a man with neat brown hair and eyes, a pair of glasses sitting on his face. He was reading the newspaper, watching her with a curious look. "This here is Ophis-chan, a friend Issei made in the playground," Auntie said, moving away from the living room and towards the kitchen. "Oh? Well, any friend of Issei's is a friend of ours." He laughed good-naturedly. "Make yourself at home, Ophis-chan. If you need anything, don't be afraid to ask, alright?" She didn't respond immediately, as Issei comes out of nowhere to drag her over to a couch. "Come on, sit down. Standing all day is going to make your legs cramped." "I won't get cramps." "You say that now, but it'll happen one way or another." Once she was deposited at a couch, Issei promptly jumped onto it to sit beside her with a loud oof. Pushing himself backwards and into the seat with a sigh. "Issei." Auntie called out. "No jumping onto couches." "Sorry, Mom." He called out, chuckling a little. Say, you feeling hungry? We'll be having dinner soon. Got anything you like? I am fine with anything. Now that's a good girl, Issei's father said with a happy smile. And then, his voice took on a teasing tone. You know, Office-chan, I try to get Issei to eat healthy, but he always pushes his greens to the side. If only he's like you. Odd. The boy in question groaned. Veggies don't taste great. Especially bell peppers. They're, like, super gross. Now, bell peppers aren't half bad. Plus, your mom makes them really great. Well, that's true, but still. Okay, everyone, come on over. I've already prepared dinner. Dinner? Eating. Yet another new experience. Ophis had never eaten once since she traveled, seeing that she has no need for sustenance besides water, she supposed. Even so, it would be impossible to convince the family that she doesn't need to eat, especially now that her newly mated friend is pulling her by the hand to the table. Plates of an amalgamation of color was prepared on the table in front of 4 seats, likely meant for each of them. Yellow, white and brown, as well as a type of green vegetable sprinkled on the very top of the mound. Fried rice. Issei cheered. And with no bell peppers. Woohoo. It's just for today, Issei. You'll have to eat them for breakfast tomorrow. His mother's words was a damper on his cheer, getting him to groan out loud. She simply giggled back. Come on, Office-chan, let's eat together. Okay. She took her seat at the table, Issei to her right with his father directly opposite of her and beside Auntie. With the plate of fried rice much closer now, she could take in the mild fragments it was giving off, which was doing something to her. Something she didn't understand, but felt that it could only be quenched by consuming this. Before she could proceed to eat it, the family clasped their hands and said a brief phrase in unison. An expression of gratitude. She supposed that is fine. Humans do value proper etiquette and the like. Once that was over, they picked up a weird wooden thing prepared by the side of the plate and dug into their food with it. Issei was the most vocal in his appreciation, letting out a pleased hum before he inserted more rice into his mouth. His parents, amused as they were, seemed to enjoy the food just the same. So it's not with their hands. She supposed that makes sense. During her time in various realms, she'd seen people make use of these things called utensils and cutlery to eat. Why they don't just use their hands might be because of a difference in culture. Nevertheless, she decided to follow their example and grasp her spoon in her right hand. Giving it an experimental wave, she proceeded to dig it into the side of the perfectly shaped mound, causing it to collapse like an eroded hill, spilling some onto her spoon. Pulling back her hand revealed a sizable pile on her spoon. Somehow, her mouth began salivating. Even her stomach was churning. Why now? It had never happened to her before. And so, filled with expectation, she moved the spoon into her mouth. And then, her world exploded into colors. Man, Mom, this is really good. Aren't these just made from leftovers? It would have been a waste to just let them expire, so I put them together to make this. Good thing I had a bit of soy sauce left, too. Otherwise, it wouldn't have turned out this well. That's pretty cool. So Office, how is? She'd noticed how the boy sitting beside her was speaking to her, but his words were simply tuned out as she was occupied by the food right in front of her. And she found herself incapable of stopping. Office couldn't understand. She'd never eaten before, and now it was harder still to imagine how she'd managed to get by in life without doing such. Had food always been this amazing? All these things she could taste, bombarding her tongue and preventing her from even entertaining the idea of stopping. So powerful was this fried rice dish that she was left wanting more when her plate ran empty, presenting it to Auntie. Is there more? Oh? By all means. I'll go get some more for you. So Office just sat in her place, bouncing up and down as she waited for Auntie as she retreated to the kitchen to put some more fried rice on her plate. Once she came back, Office couldn't have practically waited a second longer once the plate was right in front of her, spoon already in hand. Beside her, Issei snickered in amusement while his parents watched her in delight. So this is what eating feels like. So, for the time being, this'll be your room, Office-chan. My room? One's room in a house denotes a space where an individual gets to do all sorts of things in, like sleep and study, without being bothered by others. And it seems like she's about to get one of her own. Compared to the infinite dimensional gap, this one is far smaller. With a bed, a wardrobe and some other things put inside, it was spacious yet small for how little the overall room dimension is. She'd noticed 4 bedrooms, one of which likely belonged to Issei's parents and one to himself, which likely meant that the other 2 were meant for guests. Issei's father and I talked about your situation and we decided to let you stay with us for now. That is, if you're okay with it. She wasn't sure what to think about that, to be honest. During her time here, with no connections to anyone whatsoever, she'd simply roamed from place to place. Plus, she doesn't experience fatigue like other beings, so the concept of sleeping is foreign to her. Still, with how generous the Hyoudous have been thus far, she may as well. That's okay. Good. So then, we don't have any sleepwear for you, so I'll get that for you tomorrow. As for everything else, if you need anything, you can just knock on the door and call for me, okay? I'll be heading to sleep first. Have a good night, Office-chan. And just like that, she was alone. This is difficult. What is she supposed to do? She doesn't exactly feel sleepy or anything similar enough to warrant sleeping. She knows what resting is like, but as far as she knows, she's always been awake. This one seems different. What should she do? A couple fast knocks on the door alert her of someone's presence outside of her room. Office. You awake? The knob twists a couple of times before it swings inwards, revealing a face all too familiar at this point, with a familiar mess of a hair. He was already dressed in PJs, as he called them. Hayes. Need anything? No. I am, fine. Good to hear. I hope you're not feeling pressured to stay with us and everything, but it's just not safe for anyone to be out on their own, especially this late at night. Like you were? Issei had the decency to look sheepish, scratching the back of his head. Well, I suppose, yeah. So Mom and Dad would have totally wanted you to stay with us. Like right now. At least, until they know what to do next and stuff. I see. That is fine. So anyways, I'll be heading back to my room to sleep. You should too. Our bedrooms aren't too far apart, so it shouldn't be too hard to find us. In case you need anything, that is, he hummed for a while. So yeah, I came over just to wish you good night, as all. I'll be going now. About that, he paused right before he closed the door. What should I do? Sleep, I mean. How does one do that? Wait, what? Once more, his eyes widened in surprise. Wait, you're kidding, right? Sleeping. It's a normal thing for everyone. For most mortals, she can see why. But for her, an immortal creature that ran on limitless energy. I am a little different. Sheesh. Talk about strange, he didn't mean it in a demeaning way, however, if his amused smile was any indication. So sleeping. Close your eyes, don't think about nothing, and then you'll head to dreamland. Not too complicated, right? Then, would you mind helping me? Her request had him tilting his head. I have never slept before. I would like to know how to. That's so, eh? He hummed, tapping his foot against the floor as he thought about what to do before an idea seemingly popped up in his head. Alright, I got an idea. Go to bed. I'll turn off the lights first. It was a surreal experience afterwards. Lied atop something so heavenly and soft with this wonderful pillow underneath her head, her only companion being her newly made friend and the sound of her breathing in the dark. Issei came over to pull the blanket over her body, her hands automatically clutching at its hem. Ophis understood what resting was, although it was usually to regain her energy or heal from wounds sustained during a fight. In those times, inactivity sped up the healing process. But this felt completely different in comparison. The warmth that surrounded her was so comforting. Ophis wasn't sure what was happening to her, but she seemed to lose focus and energy as more time went on. It felt like when she'd first come into existence. It was a lot more relaxing than she expected it to be. You doing alright? Issei whispered quietly. This is nice. Right. So just close your eyes. You'll go to sleep soon enough. So she did just that, completely cutting off her vision. It seemed like such a reckless thing to do. What if an enemy struck at her? And yet in such a gentle and safe environment such as this, she felt like letting go of everything would be fine. That nothing could possibly go wrong. Something held her hand in the dark. It was Issei's. A small hand that felt so smooth, warm. It was such a simple gesture that she felt nothing but totally relaxed, promising safety and company for her. Eventually, Ophis, the Ouroboros dragon, fell asleep for the first time since the day she'd come into being. So it was that Issei would remain by her side until she was truly and well asleep, returning to his room moments later on. In his mind, he couldn't help but marvel at the fact that he'd just made friends with such a unique girl, unaware that that was just the first domino of what would be a sequence of larger, crazier meetings. Ophis's first day on Earth has come to an end, and on a good note. Issei had a dream that night. In it, he had encountered a girl with black hair and eyes, wearing what seemed like such an exotic dress that one could only describe as having been made by an artist. They had talked for a bit and then proceeded to play together in the playground near his home before she would follow him back home. The dream had ended there, mind blacking out and regaining cognitive thoughts as he slowly roused himself from sleep. Yawning out loud, he scratched the side of his face as he looked out the window, pondering over what they would be having for breakfast. And then, everything comes back to him. Wait a minute. That wasn't a dream. That literally happened last night. He blinked himself out of his sleepiness, looking down to his hand. The feeling of Ophis' hand in his still lingered on his mind, acting as a reminder that everything that transpired was real. Huh. What time is it? Ah, shoot, he grimaced. It's past 10 already. Oh well. At least it's a weekend. Issei remained sitting, letting the last dredges of sleep leave his system. It was warmer now, but the gentle breeze that slipped into his room through an open window felt refreshingly nice. A cold shower would really be nice soon enough. He doubted he would enjoy being sweaty and sticky later on. The boy hums. Memories from the night prior resurface, and what a heck of a night it had been. He'd gone to the playground to be on his own for a bit. A little sad about stuff, so he'd wanted to take the time to just be on his own and calm down. He didn't expect to meet such a unique girl, and for his mom to decide that she should come back home with him. Most people might think this whole situation odd, but he supposed it was better than leaving her out in the cold. Now that he thought about it, it's a little concerning that Ophis doesn't have a mom or a dad like he does. What had she been doing all this time, then? Had she been going around from place to place without anyone to look after her? That sounded so lonely and terrifying. Before he could pursue the thought even deeper, his stomach seemed to grumble, causing him to deadpan at it. Right. Let's get you sorted. Pushing himself out of his bed, he disposed his clothes before taking a shower. It was always rejuvenating to start off the day with a cold shower, even if he would prefer taking a hot one, although the warm weather as of late doesn't really make that a viable choice, and once he was done, he got himself dressed up in fresh new clothes he picked out from his wardrobe. The plain red t-shirt hung over his body with a pair of brown shorts. Once that was over, he looked himself over once in the mirror before he got out of his room and proceeded to head down. Morning, guys. Oh, good morning, Issei, his dad greeted from the dining table. He seemed to lean his head a little to the left, as if searching for something. Hey, where's Ophis-chan? Huh? She's not up yet. Well, seeing that she isn't down here yet, probably not. The boy looked around the room, finding no trace of black hair. Probably still asleep. She didn't look all too exhausted, but you never know, considering how she told him that she'd never slept before, that might be possible. Think you can go wake her up for us, buddy? Issei hummed back with a nod, quickly going up the stairs and finding the guest room that Ophis was using. It was at the end of the corridor opposite to his own room, with a door colored white like mahogany to easily differentiate the rooms. His was a redwood shade while his parents' was brown oak. Ophis, he called out, knocking on the door. You up yet? He waited for a moment, only to receive no response. Sheesh. Must be super out. What do I do? He'd never had to deal with this sort of situation. Usually, it's his mom who has to wake him up and not him doing the reverse. Even so, he supposed that everything could be a learning moment, so he sucked it up and pushed through, twisting the doorknob with a quiet apology to the sleeping girl. It was dark inside. Just the barest amount of sunlight peeked through the window, which didn't provide enough illumination for him to see the room around him. Fortunate that there wasn't anything dangerous on the floor for him to accidentally step on, so he opted to just move towards the bed only to find a suspiciously large mound hidden beneath the blanket. He quirked a brow at this. So Ophis is this kind of sleeper. He wondered how she could possibly be comfortable hunkering in like that. It's so freaking hot outside. Ophis, he gently called, softly shaking her entire body. Come on, it's already morning. Get up. Not a response, save for a light tremble and the blanket getting sucked inwards. He recognized this as an attempt to avoid waking up, to stay asleep for a little longer. He had to stifle a chuckle at the sight. Come on, you can't just stay inside forever. What should I do? Humming, he moved his head to stare upwards at the ceiling now. Issei was familiar with the concept of people acting in certain ways when someone attempts to wake them up. You know, those who grumble and groan in response, some who actually strike back with flimsy punches, and others utilize their inner turtle spirit and cover themselves with their blanket a lot more. This one is Ophis. He was the kind who would say I'm waking up, stay conscious for a minute or two, and then go back to sleep. Still, he knew he had to at least try and get Ophis up and running. Otherwise, she may as well sleep through the entire day, which, now that he thought about it, she might just pull off. Ophis, he tried once more, shaking her body. She didn't budge an inch. Geez, a deep sleeper this one is. Ophis, come on. Wake up. Mum. I don't talk sleep talk, Ophis. Come on, you need to get up. When his fourth attempt failed to rouse her even in the slightest, Issei lets out a sigh. Geez, now he knows how hard it could be for his mom whenever he sleeps in too late and refuses to get up early. What's the saying? What goes around comes around. He quickly pushes the thought out of his head. Right now, he needs to figure out some way to get her out of bed, or else they really might just miss out on breakfast. He's hoping mom would go western for today and make them some omelets. It'd be even better if they could have some pancakes, but… Wait a minute. Breakfast. He dropped down to his knees and leaned his head close to the mound. Ophis, you need to wake up and take your shower. Afterwards, we can go get our breakfast together. If you don't know what that is, it's our morning meals. It was like a flip of the switch. Before his very eyes, the blanket was immediately thrown upwards against the ceiling, revealing a very awake girl with wide eyes. Not even wasting a beat, she bodily threw herself off the bed and rushed into the bathroom without giving him even a second glance. He'd only managed to raise his head to stare at the door that slammed shut. Issei snorted. Despite literally having known her for just a single night, he already knows enough to figure out that she apparently has a fondness for sleeping and eating, despite her apparently having no knowledge about sleeping prior to last night. Everyone's got their quirks, he supposed. Without wasting a beat, he goes over to arrange the bed sheets to the best of his capabilities, then pulling open the curtains to let in some light. Much better. Feeling satisfied with his work, he made his way for the door. Only for the bathroom door to swing wide open once more, catching him by surprise. Issei, Ophis called, still fully clothed. What do I do? What do you mean? You shower. I understand. But how do I do that? Well, darn. That's really concerning. Had she never used this kind of stuff from wherever she came from? It would be one hell of an explanation if she ever tells them how she'd lived prior to coming here. Really worries him as to how she'd taken care of herself all this time. But that also brought up the issue as for how to deal with this. After all, he's a boy and she's a girl. Mom and dad always taught him to mind his manners around girls, and that meant not seeing them naked. So how yeah. How about you wait there for a bit? I'll go call mom for help. Very well. Simple problems require simple solutions. And simple tends to be the best, most of the time. So it was that he heads down once more, explaining the situation to his mom. She looked surprised, then worried, and finally determined, before letting her take over. That left him to sit with his dad down at the dining table and talk while they waited for the other two to finish up. Running water sounded in the background. After some time, his mom reappeared with Ophis, still dressed in her dress from the night prior. The girl quickly steps into the seat beside him, his parents chuckling at them as his mom heads over to serve the food. The scent of food is enough to get him bouncing in his seat and even Ophis. Even if her expression seemed emotionless as always, something that he's noticed since the night prior, the excitement is noticeable in her body movement and that minor shine in her eyes. Pancakes. Issei cheered. I figured Ophis-chan would enjoy sweets, so I decided to make this for today, his mom said. Are you okay with this, Ophis-chan? I am okay with anything, she said, looking no less excited to sink her teeth into her breakfast. What is this called? Pancakes. Granted, I'm making the Western kind, but it shouldn't taste any worse, right? Like heck it should. What his mom makes, they're always the best, and this was no exception. With a plate of 3 pancakes served before him, he could appreciate its symmetrical roundness and sheer fluffiness as he tapped his fork against it. It was a golden brownish color accompanied with a faint sweet fragrance that's just so perfect. He reached his hand for the jug with syrup, pouring a fair amount of it on the top of his pancakes. The added brown liquid seemed to make the entire presentation shimmer for a moment, making him salivate. Beside him, Ophis watched him very attentively. What is that? Syrup. It's super sweet and I add it to my pancakes for some extra taste. It's awesome. Issei prefers his syrup, his dad said. I prefer mine with fruit jam. I won't say it doesn't taste good because it really does, but I can't believe him when he says jam is superior to syrup. He said that while giving his dad the stink eye. The only thing that's perfect for pancakes is syrup, full stop. There was a challenging look upon his dad's face as he stared back. That's very silly of you, Issei. See, well syrup is just sweetness, fruit jam offers a little more variety and several aftertastes that make the food taste much better. I still can't get over how awful marmalade tastes. Seriously, it tastes like medicine. Well, that's why I told you to pair it with something like blueberry or strawberry. You can't blame me on that one. You did that to yourself. Okay, true, but also. Now, boys, no need to argue over which pairs better with pancakes at the table. You've only ever had this talk practically all the time we have pancakes. His mom rolled her eyes, looking over to Ophis with a sheepish grin. Honestly, these two never fail to banter over that. I have no idea how they manage it. It's because dad refuses to accept that syrup is superior to fruit jam when paired with pancakes. That's because it is. Both Hyoudous practically glared at each other, thunder racing between their eyes. Eventually, however, as if they shared a mind wave link their heads turned towards Ophis at the same time. The girl perked up in her seat. Alright. We'll settle it once and for all through Ophis. Issei suddenly declared. His dad nodded while Ophis simply blinked back. Office, I'll give you one of my pancakes, and I'll split it in half. I'll pour syrup on one half, while the other is lathered with some fruit jam. He gave a sideways glance at his dad, smirking victoriously. You can decide which is better that way, but I know for certain that you'll love syrup way more. His old man's eyes narrowed in response. Oh ho. Sounding rather confident there, Issei. You should know that Office-chan, who's already proven herself mature with her taste preferences, will surely appreciate fruit jam more. And we'll find that out now. He then moves an untouched pancake onto Office's plate and then onto a new plate that his mom brings over, since her plate was full enough. With precise movements, he divides it into 2 equal portions, then proceeds to pour an appropriate amount of syrup onto one half, making sure not to drown it completely in syrup. His father does the same with the other half, lathering a tantalizing mixture of strawberry and blueberry jam on the surface, giving it a color that contrasts greatly to the syrup lot in half. Yosh. Office, go for it. Black eyes blink at the plate before her before she opts to shrug, bringing up her fork and knife to eat. She cuts into the syrup portion first, splitting that half into another half, giving herself a bite-sized portion. Without wasting a moment, she engulfs it in one motion, and her eyes promptly widen in shock and awe. Ha! She loves pancakes with syrup. Don't be hasty, son. She hasn't even tried out her pancake with jam just yet. But she hasn't. Without further ado, she proceeds to cut into the other half, giving herself a sizable portion of pancake with fruit jam. When she plants it into her mouth, her eyes widen all the same. Crud. That was not good for him and his dad is smirking at him. Oh, the nerve. But that's okay. Office may be enjoying both flavors and that's totally cool with him, but she would definitely know which one is the better flavor. She's got his back. I have decided, she began, getting both males of the Hyoudou family to rise up in their seats in anticipation. To the side, Mickey Hyoudou simply watches the unfolding moment with amusement. I prefer the syrup. The fruit jams. She opens her mouth to say something at first, but then something must have struck her, as her eyes gained a strange gleam. An idea, he would say, for she suddenly turned to look back down on her plate, as if something had caught her attention. Issei and his dad watched her, noticing how she was wordless as she considered the 2 remaining quarters of pancakes with differing flavors. And then, she did the unthinkable. She stacked them together and proceeded to eat them together. This was an audible response now, and both his and his dad's jaws fell open. Her eyes were wider by a centimeter. To the side, they heard his mom giggling in amusement. This is far more delicious. So neither's the winner. She paused to finish swallowing. Would say both are. Well dang. Both Issei and his dad sighed at that response. Rather unsatisfactory, if he had to admit, but he supposed a win-win scenario was better than a complete lose-lose. Office didn't seem too bothered by this, although she did decide to continue eating, taking the jug of syrup and some jam packets to put on her pancakes, while both boys stewed in dissatisfaction. Well, his mom said. He could hear the smile in her voice. That was rather amusing to watch. You two sure were heated about your little competition, weren't you? I mean, you refused to give us a straightforward answer yourself, so we were hoping Office-chan could settle it for us, but apparently not, his dad mumbled with a little pout. Maybe it's a girl's thing. To always find an in-between. I like to call it the best of both worlds, dear, and clearly Office-chan understands that, she tutted. Now then, you've had your fun, so how about we continue on with our breakfast? He supposed they could. Issei looked down on his plate and was a little disappointed to find only 2 pancakes, recalling that he had offered one of his own for the sake of the competition. Now he was kinda wishing he hadn't. Still, as stared to the side and watched Office enjoy her pancakes with a hearty lathering of both syrup and jam, her eyes gaining light each time the sweet treats touched her tongue. He met his dad's gaze, and both of them smiled together. Well, maybe this breakfast wasn't so bad after all. Dressed to impress. Created from nothingness, one might assume that Office might just be born with absolutely nothing. It was a fair assumption, but in her case, she was born with limitless power the likes of which typical mortals couldn't even fathom. Amongst her numerous abilities that she had been born with, amassed and honed, she possessed shape-shifting magic in her arsenal of spells. And since leaving the dimensional gap, it had come a long way in helping her. It is what has allowed her to blend in with society, taking on the guise of a little girl who could walk amongst the people without turning heads. The specifics of the spell isn't something that she bothers herself thinking too much about, although she recognizes its capability of switching her appearance, that included her physical features as well as the clothes she dons. That second part helps a lot, considering how she doesn't have any currency to use to buy clothes in the other realms. But now that she's temporarily moved in with this family of humans, she doubted she could actively make use of any form of magic. These people seem as average as they could get, with no signs of unique heritage or magic present in this family. That alone meant that they'd likely be so shocked if they found her using magic. And even if she were to use her shape-shifting abilities to switch her clothes out of their sight, they'd certainly question her later. Best she avoid causing any trouble for herself and any of them. Right now, she wishes she sort of could, however, as Auntie is currently admiring the clothes that she's currently wearing, practically eyeing her from top to bottom with a very observant gaze. This was a completely new experience, and that might not be one of her favorite things. Whoever made this design is just amazing. Where did you get this dress? I had it. She'd already told her how she didn't have any parents, and concocting a lie simply isn't something that she is good at just yet. So I've been wearing it for a very long time. I see. Well, it goes without saying that this is a really lovely dress, but we can't have you wearing just this. You even wore it for breakfast just now. Auntie has her hands on her hips as she says this, smiling widely. So it's time to go shopping for clothes. For some reason, a strong sense of dread built up in her. They exited her room and went downstairs. Auntie mentioned taking the motorbike because the space outside their house wasn't enough for a car to fit to get to the shopping mall, something that had her perking up. She had seen countless modes of transportation across the realms, but the concept of a metallic contraption with wheels that moved without being dragged by an animal or relying on magic did interest her somewhat. Just as she was about to leave, she caught sight of brown hair peeking out from the edge of the couch. She skipped over to him, hopping up to hang from the side of the couch. Issei. Office. He looked back over the couch. Oh, hey. What's up? I am going out with Auntie to buy clothes. It seemed as if she wasn't the only one uncomfortable with the notion, for whatever reason, as Issei's expression momentarily wavered. What about you? Oh. Well, I'm guessing that Mom wouldn't want me to come along because I probably wouldn't be providing anything useful besides complaining. Issei absolutely hates shopping, especially when it comes to clothes shopping. Auntie came over with an amused scoff. That's because it's Luong. He whined out. I don't have the patience to stand around, wait forever and try out a million clothes. Issei, shopping isn't meant to be quick. It's meant to be meticulous and time-consuming. Otherwise, you'll end up buying something that you'll regret, especially clothes. After all, you'll be wearing them, so it's important to make sure that they fit and are comfortable. Girls are especially picky because they want to make sure what they get is stylish and fits their tastes. You would know because you're one, aren't you? Ha. Please, let's not try to change the situation, she rolled her eyes. I'm old and I'm only getting older. You're literally only 30 plus. And I'm only getting older, she repeated. So I'm more a woman than a girl. Can't go back to my teenager child days. But never mind that. Office-chan, let's go buy you some new clothes. For a minute there, she considered telling her that she preferred staying home, but she had a feeling that that wouldn't work. Very well. Goodbye, Issei. See ya. Bright light greeted them when they exited the house, Office momentarily blinded by the drastic difference in illumination. Auntie gestured to a simple thing with 2 wheels and a green coat, referred to as a motorbike. She gets on it, fixing on a strange helmet around her head before helping to put it on the younger girl. This, she does not like, with her ears tugged in and all. Still, she supposed it was important to keep the head safe. Office moved to sit behind the woman, watching intently as she inserted a metallic object into a slot and twisted it in a direction. She then flicked down a red switch to her right, squeezed a metallic bar to her left, and pressed a yellow button on her right BRR. The girl momentarily jumped when a loud blubbering noise erupted as the bike growled to life. Alright, hold on tight, sweetie. Very well. If there was one thing to be said about Issei's mother, it was the fact that she was an incredibly safe biker, making sure to keep track of her surroundings. She traveled relatively slow, so there wasn't any need to worry about falling off of the moving bike. How she could be scared of this when she technically wouldn't be injured from the fall is a relative surprise. She had to admit, though. This felt nice. The feeling of the wind against her body as her hair danced behind her as they moved on the street, and the warmth on her skin was far different from anything else she'd experienced thus far. Eventually, they arrive at the nearest shopping mall. Auntie parked someplace close to the entrance, and as the both of them got off the bike, Office felt a little shaky on her feet. She gasped for a second. Not used to riding bikes, Office-chan. No, that was my first time. They don't waste a moment to move into the mall to escape the blaze, welcomed by a draft of cold wind when the glass doors slid open. Office couldn't help the sigh of relief, enjoying the immediate relief. To her side, Auntie giggled in amusement. She had visited several places like this. The kinds where numerous people gather to barter and whatnot, although this one seemed a lot more pleasing to the eye. So many people were walking around, filling the space with much chatter that made it impossible to hear her own thoughts. Humans, but also devils and angels. And, if she's not mistaken, other races as well. Fascinating. So that man was not wrong to say that the other races also reside here. To the naked eye, they barely look any different to the humans that are oblivious to the otherworldly races walking amongst them. That they were capable of masking their signatures really make them seem like humans. However, Ophis isn't called the one of the strongest for nothing, she could easily tell which is which just by looking at them. That they weren't causing trouble was a little surprising, however. Last she recalled, the three races were in a three-ways war with each other. This time, it seems as if they were purposely attempting to reach a state of amity with one another, and it shows in how well they're mingling with one another here. Perhaps they're attempting for peace between the three races. And, if that would turn out well, then all races might just put a cease and desist to all their squabbles. Earth wouldn't have to host their petty wars and be a victim to the entire mess. So long as they do not try to step out of line, then, all is well. So Ophis-chan, what do you like to wear? Snapping out of her earlier thoughts, the noise around her returns to an audible volume as she looked up to meet Auntie's eyes. I have no preferences. I will leave the choice to you. Then we'll do some looking together and buy what you like best, Kay? Okay. So they walked together, searching for the clothes department. Along the way, Ophis looked around, taking in the sights of every shopfront and colors that were present. The shopping mall, as Auntie had called it, catered to just about everything: entertainment, food, clothes. She even spotted a jewelry store, a vintage shop filled with antique gadgets, an old-looking design bookstore, and a lot more. It didn't take long for them to reach the clothes department, with mannequins dressed up to display the newest additions and hotter trends. Several people were already walking around trying to look for clothes to buy. Most were mothers with their own children or significant partner, she noticed. Auntie guided her by the hand to another section, where children clothes were located. It certainly seems a little annoying that she would have to be dressed in clothes for children, but she supposed that was something she'd have to deal with for choosing this body. Auntie hadn't wasted a single moment, browsing through the selections like a warrior tearing through a mob of monsters. She checked price tags, designs and colors, calling her over from time to time to check if they fit her, or if they looked good on her. Ophis let her, if only because she herself wasn't sure what to do in this situation. What she does come to realize, as the hours tick by and the morning eventually turns into afternoon, is the fact that shopping is not a fast ordeal. They'd been in the same spot for almost a whole hour before they'd move on to the next store, and then the next, and then the next. By then, she'd already picked out at least 3 dresses and some other things, like socks and even shoes. And with each passing hour, Ophis was beginning to grow weary. She really wished she could just be home right about now. I think you'll go well in dark colors, Auntie's comment had her eyes flicking over to the dress in her hand. It was a simple black lace dress with the hem of the skirt likely reaching down to her knees, with a sash at the front. Like that dress you wear. You think so? MMHM. It goes well with your eyes and hair, her comment had her tugging on a single strand of black hair. To her, if infinity were a color, it would be black. After all, something that goes on and on would eventually escape the light and meet darkness, hence her chosen color scheme. Auntie was not privy to this, instead focused on trying to see if the dress she chose would fit on the girl. I know I've already picked out quite a number, Ophis-chan, but do you prefer wearing a one-piece dress or two-piece? She faltered at the terms. Ophis had simply conjured her dress on a whim, without giving much thought as to how it should appear or whatever. All of this attention to detail is simply something that she is incapable of grasping just yet. Anything. Moo, that one would look good with you, Auntie reaches for another set. This one is a t-shirt with long sleeves and what seemed to be an outer part, which was black with floral designs along the sides. This here is a strap dress. You wear it on the outside of the t-shirt. I think you'd look good in it. Want to? No need, she hastily responded, knowing that she would likely want her to go into the fitting room to try it on. She had lost count of the number of clothes she had already put on. Simply measure it on me. And then, we can take it. Is that so? Well, if that's okay with you then. The shopping doesn't last much afterwards, much to her relief. She could now understand, at least to some extent, Issei's reluctance of going shopping. It will be hardly missed. Still, the opportunity to spend time with Auntie had been somewhat fun, in its own way. She had experienced company, sure, but this was a different kind compared to her way of interacting with Issei. Auntie was less energetic and open, but no less kind and caring. It made her feel warm inside. Before she could consider leaving, however, the older Hyoudou tapped her on the shoulder, drawing her gaze up to meet her excited grin. Say, I've got an idea. We're back. Welcome back. How was the shopping? Oh. Ophis-chan, you look wonderful. Thank you. The sounds of conversation had Issei looking away from the television, in time to miss the guy in the bodysuit deal, an explosive punch to the monster that sent it floating into space. He awed at that, but chose to let it go as curiosity towards the situation dragged him out of the couch and sent him over to check out the commotion. Hey guys, what's up, eh? He blinked. Wait, Office, when did you change your clothes? Didn't you just get here? Auntie asked me to change in the shopping mall. Well, that explains it. Movement in front of him has her looking to her just as she extends her arms to the side. Does it look good? Well, when it comes to fashion, he doesn't exactly know enough about it to be able to describe it in an essay. But the best he could understand about her dress was how it's a single lace dress with an exterior skirt. Well, the outer skirt is transparent with black floral patterns across it. A thin white ribbon was tied around her neck. Now that he thought about it, wasn't her previous dress also completely black in color? Maybe she has a preference for black or something. Actually, now that he thought about it. It looks good, he said honestly, humming. The black dress goes really well with your hair and eyes. I like it. Really? Yeah, he then grinned. I know that some people have specific colors that go well with them. The way I see it, I think your color scheme would be black, white and maybe purple. That must be why you look good in this dress. I see. For some reason, she goes quiet, though there's a very minuscule smile on her face as she averts her gaze from him. Issei grins a little wider from the sight. Well, Mom has always said how a girl likes an honest compliment from time to time. And he hadn't been lying when he called Office pretty. She really does look great in that. Although, on that very night when he would then go on to ask her how their shopping trip had gone, she would go quiet yet again, albeit with an uncomfortable look. They bonded over their distaste of long shopping sessions afterwards. The stray tried to come into their house. There are always plenty of stories of humans falling for the temptation of greed and power that spurs them to reach out to devils to have their wishes granted. In such stories, there is always a blood contract that ends with a human losing something in the end, be it their very lives or something of equal value. As it turns out, Kuo was known for being a territory under the devil's control, specifically that of the Gremory household. Its heiress, Ria's Gremory, oversees all that transpires in the town, protecting its inhabitants with her peerage. They were also known to grant requests, just as countless stories entail. Rather than forming blood contracts and promising power, however, these requests usually end up being tea parties, cosplay sessions and even discussions about anime. Not as violent as old stories depict devils to be. But in the shadows, evil always lurks. And reincarnated devils, those who were originally that of another species before getting reincarnated as devils under the command of a king, are prey to this sin, for those who slay their master and have lost themselves to their power, are prone to losing themselves and going out of control. Clearly, Ria's Gremory and her peerage is tasked with this anytime a stray manages to trespass Kuo. But having been away to sort out some business of theirs back home, one manages to get into the town under the cover of night. Blood, I need blood. When a person is reincarnated by their master, a bond is formed between both individuals that links their souls together. This is necessary to protect the servant from spiritual collapse, for the process of returning a dead one back to life isn't exactly a simple process that comes with all sorts of limitations and dangers. So when a servant slays their master by their own hand, it effectively breaks its bonds with its master that distorts their own soul. Deterioration follows, and as its mind loses any semblance of self-control, the reincarnated becomes a stray that seeks to satiate their desires. And those who are damned will be slain without mercy. This one, who once served a young baron who overlooked a territory to the west side of Japan, recognizes the fact that it may die for entering this region. But after having escaped its hometown and traveling this far, it has effectively burned itself of all its energy. Food is necessary now. Everything else was secondary. Where its words were sluggish, blood-red eyes taking in the sights of the quiet town in search of prey. I must eat. This town is much smaller compared to where it had come from. And with less security, which makes this place a much easier picking. If there was a time to feast, now is the moment. Finding no one wandering the streets, the stray begins to move across the rooftops of the houses, deciding to get a closer look. A hiding spell has been casted to mask its presence, effective enough to fool even high-class devils. No one would be spotting it any time soon. Eventually, however, the stray arrives upon a two-story house, staring at it from the outside. It was clearly illuminated, with sounds of laughter from within. Sniffing the air, the scents of two adults and a child fill its nostrils. Meat. That alone was enough to send a thrill down its spine, its earlier pangs of hunger amplified into a full-blown ravenousness that has it drooling down the chin. And the fact that they are humans is even better, as they tasted the most delicious among all races. Which one to eat, it muttered, the remnant of its mouth forming a twisted smile that would have horrified most people. Its hands reached up to seize its throat, feeling it bulge each time it gulped. Why not all? Better yet, why not none? It was a reflex born out of years of training, the devil that it once was under the servitude of another acting as an assassin that relied on speed. Its leg snapped as it leapt backwards, away from the little girl that stood precisely where he had just been mere moments ago, her blank eyes staring at him. Impossible. It had trained itself to be able to sense those approaching it from afar. But for this one to have somehow bypassed that and gotten that close to it. You intended to eat the people inside there, did you not? The girl was not human. Though it looked like one, its aura signature was simply too foreign to categorize her as a human. Plus, her feet would have made it impossible for her to be called one to begin with. Wind picked up, blowing her hair to the side as the hem of her skirt and the ribbon that hung around her neck danced in the direction of the breeze. Her gaze was unblinking, wholly focused on the creature, which never took its eyes off of her in preparation for her next move. You must be a stray, yes. It refused to answer her, but she didn't seem to care. You managed to enter this town. Those devils that watch this place. Not very attentive, are they? Or perhaps they are occupied. What are you? I am Ophis, she said. The stray did not respond, unfamiliar with the name. You do not know of me? You are unimportant. Leave, or you will die. Me? Die. The words were uttered with a complete absence of mockery or pride, yet the stray felt challenged all the same. That would be impossible. The humans here, however, can. You are after them, yes. For a moment, her gaze seemed to move back to the house it had been staring at from afar. Something flickered in her eyes before she stared back at it. Unfortunately for you, I cannot allow that. You intend to protect them? Very well. Baring its fangs at the young girl, the stray felt its body crack. Bones and muscle were displaced as its vessel transformed, growing even larger than it already was. A pair of ivory scythes grew out of its palms, eyes dotting every inch of its torso in the process. Evil energy wafted off of its body, like a physical manifestation of its own aura. This girl thinks herself strong, does she? Though she had managed to catch it by surprise earlier, that wouldn't be possible this time. Not when it had succeeded in killing its own master that fateful night, who had been known all across hell as the Deathbringer. Such title befitted a man who had survived countless fights, yet he fell to his servant all the same. This would be no different. The first initiative is the key to an immediate victory. Like an unwound spring, it darted forward straight for the foolish girl that dared stand in its way. It was a rush of adrenaline and ecstasy for such an easy victory that would soon be followed with a culling to satisfy its appetite that had it laughing like a madman. It was no weakling, it was a devil who had surpassed its feeble master. Who had survived years on his own, battling his dying body and mind and growing stronger to fend off all that attempted to slay it. Just one death amongst the many. And then, it would feast. You are truly foolish, she said. And then, without even a chant or gesture, she said in a monotonous voice. Die. Something snapped. It sounded like a branch or twig getting split in the center, the sound audible enough that the background noise just couldn't completely deafen. That was the single thing that whatever was left of its brain could interpret as its vision was then completely reduced into nothingness, final breath taken into its expiring lungs as it collapsed forwards, bodily crashing down on the street below Ophis like a puppet with its strings detached. A single image of its old master surfaced for just a brief second before all thought ceased to be. Ophis, from atop the roof, stared down and watched as the stray's body disintegrated into dust. It lasted a full 20 seconds before it completely disappeared, leaving nothing behind. How had one gotten into here? It was honestly a little weird that she had managed to come across a stray on the very exact moment she decided to go outside for some fresh air. Encountering a stray is like that sort of thing where getting into an actual criminal scenario is less than 2%, so for her to somehow get into that exact moment seemed rather impressive. Still, she realized she was a little more focused on the part where the stray had apparently come here to find some humans to eat. That she felt bothered to actually stop the stray seemed a little unusual, considering how she typically doesn't try to engage others in fights to the death, besides Great Red, and even that had been much long ago. She might have just let it go ahead and do whatever the hell it would have wanted to, if it didn't choose to bother her. But when she thought about how it was about to target Issei and his family. Ophis? Where are you? Issei. She quickly warps back down to the ground, close enough to the house, but far away enough that Issei couldn't spot her right away. Once she was done, she quickly heads over to the front door, where the brunette was standing with his hands cupped around his mouth. When he spots her, his grin comes to him easily. Ophis. You had a good walk outside. Yes. I was enjoying the cold air. Oh yeah? Well, I guess you're not wrong, he crossed his arms behind his back, looking up. Tonight's a little colder than usual. Is it? Well, she hadn't exactly noticed before, but tonight certainly does seem that way, now that he mentioned it. It's been hot as of late, after all. The difference tonight really does seem very obvious at the moment. It really is nice tonight. So you want to stay outside for a little longer? I don't think so, she said after a while, looking back at him. Let's go inside. Sure thing. Was actually about to call you inside because mom just prepared some orange slices. Betcha gonna like that. Oranges? That would be nice, yes. And so, as the two children walk back into their home, Ophis' second day on Earth comes to an end, although she would then be roped into yet another argument between Issei and Uncle regarding which fruit, apples or kiwis, were better. Auntie forbade them from having competitions like this for a month afterwards. End of the part 1. So how was this story? I hope you like it. And if you like it, share this story with your friends and like the video too. And don't forget to subscribe our channel for daily awesome fanfiction. Okay, it's time for me to go. Bye bye.